Welcome to Awakened Titans podcast with Lily Patrascu, mind-blowing conversations with influential business titans sharing how you can manifest abundance, love, joy, success through quantum awakening, quantum manifestation, quantum healing, quantum miracles, exponential business growth, and innovative products and services. Discover how to raise your first million in venture capital. In today's session with Sean Shepard, he is one of the world's leading authorities on product market fit. And Sean is a serial entrepreneur with 3 exits, venture capitalist, and managing partner at U+. At corporate venture builder U+. He's a globally recognized thought leader with over 30 years of experience, bringing new products to the market, including as a 5-time sales founder with 3 exits. The first question is, what is the secret to your success?
I don't know if it's a secret. I think it's just a lot of hard work and being willing to adapt on the fly to find out what big problems I can solve in markets that are big enough for people to care about that I can solve really well. And it's just a lot of grit and determination and continuing from one failure to the next with no loss of enthusiasm.
Thank you. And what's your secret to become an awakened business titan, and so that you can help so many companies to raise their first million and to grow such amazing companies?
Well, I think you have to obviously understand whether or not the business you're in is what I would call venture capable, and then you have to understand the venture capital business model and how that game is played, and identify ideal investor profiles based on their investment thesis and whether or not it matches what you're doing. And then, of course, you have to demonstrate that you have the right team in a big market with a proven business model that's scalable and can demonstrate an exit value potentially that venture capitalists care about. And you have to show traction, especially in a market like this where there's plenty of dry powder on the sidelines, but people are being more discerning given the market conditions about who they invest in and what they invest in. So it's really about understanding VCs, their business model, what they're looking for, and then demonstrating that you have the right team and the right model and the right market with the right amount of traction and differentiation.
Thank you. What I've noticed over the last, I would say 2-3 years, is that so many companies come to me and they say, oh, I'm looking for 5 million, I'm looking for 2 million, I'm looking for whatever amount of money to grow my business, and they have a startup. So I have an endless number of, thousands of different companies that come to me and they want help with that. And what I find is that there's not as many investors available to actually look at those different projects. And one of the most, you can say the biggest problems I see is, first, let's say you go to an event and you have, let's say you have a few venture capitalists that are presenting. And every time you ask, can I contact you? They'll typically say, contact me on LinkedIn. And then there's no answer after that. So how do you kind of go, how do you skip this hurdle? Because the first thing is that you have to be you have to have a certain account in LinkedIn to be able to even contact certain people. And once you've reached a limit, that's it. So I do think there's a missed opportunity on both sides, because first, a venture capitalist could be ruining their own opportunity of finding another unicorn by directing people to LinkedIn rather than to WhatsApp or email, whatever it is, something that's more easily accessible. And second, how to make sure that your project gets read so you can raise your first million in venture capital.
Well, the first thing you have to understand is the average venture capital firm, at least when I was doing it, we'd look at 1,000. We'd look at 1,000 deals a year, and we'd write about 10 to 15 checks. So you have to recognize that the odds are dramatically stacked against you, number one. And we're not necessarily assessing you for what you're doing as much as we are comparing it against the other options that we have, right? It's a very simple supply and demand issue. And we only have so many resources and so much time to do that. Depending on the size of the fund, the typical fund structure is what's called a 2 and 20 model. You raise a fund, you're able to operate that fund with a budget that's 2% of the total amount raised. So if you have a $100 million fund, that's a 5-year fund. You can spend $2 million a year on a team of people to run and manage that and look at deals, et cetera. So you have a limited ability from a staffing perspective to look at a lot of things, right? A $2 million a year budget might afford you 5 or 6 people, maybe 7 people, 8 people to manage thousands of inbound requests. So they have to be very discerning in how they manage that inbound funnel. So what they typically do is they won't take introductions from, they won't take cold introductions. They want warm introductions from their network, which includes other venture capitalists, other entrepreneurs they've invested in, maybe accelerators and incubators that they might work with, corporate partners that they might work with, universities and academic research labs and things like that, where they will have these relationships. So they're looking for a direct introduction, a referral. So the first thing I tell entrepreneurs is, if you don't already have that network, then you need to get that network. And there's really a couple of ways you can do that. One is you can join respected and well-known successful incubators and accelerators that have a network of investors that once you've gone through their program, they will put you in front of those people. Another is to build your network of entrepreneurs like yourself and or potential investors in the ecosystem, so that you can get direct connections. Now, there are databases like PitchBook you can purchase, and you can spam the hell out of investors, and you might get some hits from that, and that's fine. But really, at the end of the day, you need to get warm introductions from trusted connections of those VCs to have a real chance of getting a solid look. So that's the first thing. And once you do, you better be prepared. You have to have a really strong story. Storytelling is undervalued and underappreciated and undernoticed when it comes to how you pitch your idea to the market. And so you have to start with a narrative that says that the game is changing and the new winners of this game are going to be doing things this way, and we're out in front of that. Here's how we're solving for it. And here's why we're the ones that are going to win. Here's how we're different. And here's our proven track record of creating traction for that, right? And so that's the challenge that exists. You're in this world, your net worth is your network, and you need to build one.
Thank you. What I found is that many, many years ago, when I started out as a book publisher, it was so hard to even get my first client. And I remember I even offered it for free to some people that were, higher profile. And some of them actually didn't take it, right? And now in hindsight, I'm sure they would regret that. So how do you make sure that you're someone who doesn't have to wait maybe a few years for your project, for your idea to actually get accepted, and to get accepted quickly, aside from actually building a network? And I do find that, for example, when you build a brand, when you're, speaking at different events, then you get to meet some VCs, for example, when you, publish a book, or when you, let's say, appear in the media, and then you get introduced to a VC, then you have higher profile and also you have some traction, right? But let's say if you're starting out with absolutely nothing, how do you make sure that you you kind of go over these hoops? And let's say if you were to be part of your accelerator, how does it work? Do you have to pay in advance for a certain fee, or is it commission based, or how does it work to become part of this accelerator so you can kind of jump to the top of the agenda of any VC?
Well, different accelerators have different business models where they'll take an equity stake. Sometimes they'll write a check and they'll get an outsized equity stake for the help that they provide. Others might charge you a small fee. I would stay away from those. I would focus on the ones that are that will write a check and or take some small equity stake, typically somewhere between, let's say, 2 or 3% percentage points and 7 to 10 percentage points, depending on how much money they put in as part of the process. But to answer the prior question, that's the reality and that's the challenge. You have to go out and demonstrate to the world that you know how to build a successful business. It's hard. The only people that are going to invest in you in the very beginning are people who know you, like you, and trust you, and they're going to invest in you because of you, not because of what you're doing. And that's what we call the friends and family round, right? So you might need to bootstrap, you might need to hustle, but nothing speaks louder than traction. Traction speaks louder than words. And if you can demonstrate that you can get predictable, repeatable, profitable, scalable revenue in a venture-capable market, then you're in a good position because it's the only story you have to tell. It's a lot easier to raise money once you're making it. And that's just the nature and the rub of that world, right? It's no different than if you don't have a collateral for a bank loan, then nobody's going to give you a bank loan. Or if you don't have a profitable business that they collateralize against, they're not going to give you a bank loan, right? So you've got to go out and actually do the work, and you've got to find those early customers. And if you can demonstrate that you can get those early customers and get yourself to a growth rate that makes sense and to, show a path to profitability, you have a much better chance.
Thank you. And what metrics do you look at in order to determine whether a project is worth investing in?
Yeah, well, I mean, you start with the TAM, SAM, the total addressable market, the service addressable market, and the service attainable market. And is that large enough if you get some measure of penetration, just say 1 to 2, 3, 4%, that you can generate an exit value that's interesting? Most VCs want to see billion-dollar exit opportunities. You've got to be able to tell a story about how you can get there. And they have to believe it and see it. And then on the leading metrics, I call them the sort of the day-to-day metrics, depends on the business model, but it's things like month-over-month growth rate, monthly recurring revenue, annual recurring revenue, engagement metrics like daily or weekly or monthly or quarterly active usage of your product or service that shows that there's big adoption. It's getting the right, if you're B2B, it's getting the right logos and brands to be referenceable early customers, to tell the world they're better off with you than without you and why. Your ability to manage your cash and your runway, and being able to demonstrate that, right? Those are the things that we're looking for. And most importantly, of the team market model, traction and differentiation rubric or criteria, team is the most important thing. And how do you demonstrate that you're the right team? Well, maybe you have built a personal brand and you are a thought leader in your sector or industry, or maybe you have a background where you felt the problem that you're solving for and you know everybody in that industry and that industry knows you and respects you. So you've got expertise. The other thing is, can you demonstrate that you can get that traction without help? And if you can, that tells me a lot about you. Can you get that first cohort of customers, whether it's 3 to 5 big enterprises or a few hundred or a few thousand consumers? Can you do that in a way that shows me that you can do it in a profitable way?
Thank you. And how important is it to have the right brand? And what does that even look like to have the right brand? Because, for example, right now, there's such a big focus on being a conscious entrepreneur and building a conscious business. Do you find that the world is kind of shifting towards that, like being more aware of building a conscious business? And how do you build a brand around that? And is that important?
I guess it depends on the industry. At the end of the day, I'll be very honest with you. Mm-hmm. People all want to be conscious. They all want to save the planet. They all want to do good things. But if the unit economics don't line up, they're not going to write a check. Mm-hmm. Right? It's no different than, I would love to drive an electric vehicle, but I'm not driving one until it's the same price as my fossil fuel vehicle. because it doesn't make economic sense. So those trade-offs happen, whether you're a consumer or you're an investor. And then, of course, there is what industry are you playing in? If you're doing ESG, of course you've got to be conscious, and of course you've got to solve for sustainability and environmental and social, governmental issues. Or if you're doing, green tech, or you're doing anything in sustainable energy, those are sort of table stakes in those worlds. But yeah, that's how I would put it.
Thank you. For me, I think being a conscious business is a lot more than doing ESG. For me, it's also about personal responsibility, being punctual, and how you can transmit that to your entire team in a way that you have this mission of what you're about treating people fairly and being kind and being respectful, and email back when you said you would, things like that. Even if you're, I don't know, selling petrol, you could still do that, I think. Do you agree there that creating a personal brand as the founder of the company and being a conscious entrepreneur, being an awakened titan matters in terms of raising millions, if the numbers stack up?
Well, sure. I think everything you're talking about speaks to, you have to have a mission and a vision, and then you've got to create a culture. And a culture is just how we do things around here. And that's got to be supported by a value system that the leadership, not just, espouses, but actually, their actions speak, once again, louder than their words. And of course, all of that can contribute to building a personal and or corporate brand. At the end of the day, a startup is a stranger with a strange offering going to other strangers and asking them to do strange things together. And if you recognize that as an entrepreneur, hopefully that means you call it being awakened or enlightened. I call it just general self-awareness or mindfulness, right? Being completely self-aware of yourself, your own behaviors, and how that impacts others. And all of that lends itself towards executing well, right? And building a great culture. And you will need those things, especially as you scale. But to an investor, it's going to come down to those: do they believe in the team? Is the market big enough? Do they think that you're the one that's going to win? Because they will only make one bet on a product in a market. They're not going to invest in two competitors, right? And can you demonstrate that through traction? And that's just the reality of that situation if you're going out to raise money.
Thank you. What I found, for example, in my case, for my business, Brand for Speakers book publishing, and also for my partner's business, Speakers Are Leaders, is that when you are very conscious of your actions and you have a great mission to empower people, then you can attract the right team. And although maybe initially you're not going to attract a VC because you don't have the right numbers initially, but I think it can help you to actually attract the right team. And it can also help you to attract users that believe in that same thing that you believe, because they have to be aligned with your vision and your mission and values. So it can indirectly, I believe, can help you towards down the line, help you to raise millions, but it's not like an immediate thing. It's a thing that gets built over time. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, well, so when you're talking about it from a talent perspective, you're talking about attracting the right people into your universe. So the best way to do that is to tell the world your view. And if you're honest and open about your perspective and your vision, the people that agree with that will come towards you, and the people that don't won't. And that's a good thing. With respect to talent, it's really important to attract not just people who share your vision and understand your current reality and are willing to go through a wall to help you achieve it. They have to be what I call stage relevant. They need to be wired the right way. People who are successful at what I call 0 to 1 work, or what Peter Thiel coined as 0 to 1 work, rather, is very different than the people who do 1 to 10 or 10 to N. What they enjoy, what they're good at, what their attributes and characteristics are different. They get bored at the 10 to N stuff. So you need to attract not just people who share your vision, but have also had experience in going from 0 to 1. They don't have to be successful every time, because you're not going to be. Most of the time, you're going to fail. But if they come back with the same level of enthusiasm every time they get kicked in the teeth, that says something about who they are. And then the same thing goes for early customers. They need to share your vision, understand your current reality, and have the right mindset and individual psychology to take the risk of working with you at this stage. Because again, to the market, whether you know it or not, you're a stranger with a strange offering, right? And you're risky and you're unproven. So who's willing to provide you that? There's only a small subset of the market that will, and that's an individual psychology. I'd recommend everybody read Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm for that purpose. It talks about the 5 communities of humans and how they respond to risk and change. And the 2 that you need to focus on are what he calls the innovators and the early adopters. And they only represent about 1 in 7, 1 in 8 people, but they do exist. And you have to figure out their profile and how to identify them. And you do that by sharing your worldview with a very simple narrative about, these are the kind of people I'm trying to help, and here's how I'm trying to help them, and here's the kinds of results they're going to get if they work with me. And the people who agree with that problem and that vision and see a future that doesn't exist, much like you, will respond. They'll raise their hand and say, yes, I'm interested in learning more. And that's your opportunity to create a relationship that hopefully you can commercialize and demonstrate value and create value, and get to that cohort of really referenceable customers.
Thank you. And how do you create an impactful brand name that will attract an impact investor?
Well, I think you have to have that narrative, number one. And then you have to demonstrate through your actions that you can deliver on your promises. Because to me, there's 2 things about brand, right? Building a brand means that you have to meet or exceed the expectations and the promise that you make. And then the realization of the manifestation of your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And that's where the credible brand building comes from. It's when others talk about how great you are, not you.
Thank you. And how do you create the right storytelling for your brand so that, imagine I'm meeting you at an event, okay, and I have a great elevator pitch, and you say, okay, contact me on LinkedIn and send me your pitch or whatever, and then there's no answer, let's say. How do I make sure that I have the right messaging in that, 30 seconds or 1 minute, or let's say 5 minutes that we spoke at an event, where you are so impacted by my story and the name of my brand that you have to read my, my pitch deck and you get back to me? What do I have?
You have to have a very clear narrative of who your customer is, what their problem is, and how and why you're the one that's going to be able to solve it. And from a tools perspective, the business model canvas is a very simple tool that anybody can download and use. And it starts with, for this customer who has this problem that creates these kinds of negative impacts, we have a solution that looks like this, and this is why you want to work with us. And it's a great way to just run through an exercise to develop that narrative. And then you've got to start testing it in the market, right? And you have to rapidly experiment and iterate on it based on all of that. I love the story of Walt Disney when he was going to raise money to build a theme park. He was already a famous cartoonist. He'd already had very famous movies and productions. He had plenty of success and was known in that way. But when he wanted to open a theme park, he had to go to some 70 different banks to get somebody to lend him money to do it. But at the end of every meeting, he asked them, I understand you're not interested, but can I ask you, and I'm not asking you to change your mind, but what should I have said that would have made you interested? And he started to collect that feedback. And after every meeting, eventually he got someone to say yes. And now we've got Disneyland, right? That's the approach that you need to take. And don't ask people for their opinion, ask them for their advice. People are much more responsive when you ask them for advice, not their opinion.
Thank you. And I saw your commitment to making the world a better place. So what would you say is your blueprint to become an awakened Titan on a personal level? And how did that help you to build this massive business?
Well, it took a long time for me to awaken. I was probably in my mid-30s before I recognized that, there was no distinction between personal and professional development. If you develop the person, you develop the professional. Reading and constantly consuming content around human behavior and trying to understand human nature and the science behind it, so that I can understand myself and understand others and understand the impact that I could have on others. Whether that was getting involved in things like Carol Dweck's Growth Mindset, which is very eye-opening for me, or Robert Greene's work on mastery, or Malcolm Gladwell, 10 years, 10,000 hours, or Robert Sapolsky, or Andrew Huberman, or any number of Stoicism, and reading Meditations from Marcus Aurelius, and learning how to sort of incorporate all of those things into my life. I mean, philosophy, psychology, understanding human behavior, trying to create mindfulness, mastery, and the appropriate behaviors. So I kind of look at the rubric of, there's things you need to know, there's things you need to be able to do, and then there's ways you behave when you do them. And so trying to figure that out, I learned a lot of that building my school, Growth X Academy, to train people to work in the startup world, because there's nobody teaching that. And through just researching and understanding the pedagogy of how you can accelerate learning through direct experience with this idea of knowledge, skills, and behaviors, and mindset and mastery. Mindset, skill set, and mastery was a great mental model for me to sort of start developing myself in that way, and then trying to do that with others. And so that's kind of what I try to impart on people, is that's just a constant journey, that you never stop learning and never stop growing, and hopefully never stop consuming things that have absolutely nothing to do with an industry or a product, or even a role inside of a company. It has to do with developing yourself as a person and a professional. And I think that's what's done it for me. And the reason I chose technology is I grew up in Silicon Valley, and my father and my family were all in big tech. And so I understood that world. But I also watched my father, who was a good engineer, but a brilliant leader, become, a CEO in Silicon Valley because of his leadership ability, not because of his engineering ability. And so I recognized that the soft skills, which I don't know why we call them soft skills, because they're the hardest ones to master, are more important than the hard skills. If you want to be able to create leverage to help as many people as possible. So you do it through your leadership skills, and then you do it through, for me, technology, because technology can be leveraged to help people at scale. And that's what I always liked.
Thank you. One of the biggest things that has made an impact in my life is my commitment to excellence. But I had a major twist in that when I realized I was being inauthentic, because I used to always be 15 minutes late for my meetings. And it was just a habit I had. And after going to this course, I realized that you have to be your word. When you are your word in everything, and how you do one thing, you do everything, that impacts so much everything else that you're doing. So my question is, what extraordinary habits did you develop that enabled you to become an awakened titan and build this massive business?
I think it starts with reading and or listening to content around human nature and psychology and philosophy every day, learning something new every day that I can incorporate into my daily life. I think having children also help, because they will just flat out tell you the truth. You're being a jerk. Dad, you're not listening to your mother. Dad, you're not being a good father or a good husband. Those kinds of things. And having people around you that will tell you the truth. Because most people don't want to tell you the truth if it creates conflict or more work for them, especially today. We're in a very eggshell sort of society these days. And I love the truth, and I love people telling me the truth, even if I don't like it at the moment. But that's, to me, that's the first habit. And then the second one is like I said, surrounding yourself with people who want what's best for you, but will also tell you the truth.
Thank you. And how did you become a Titan and sell your first million?
Sell or raise?
Okay, let's say raise. How did you become a Titan and raise your first million?
Well, I was able to join an early stage startup as the first sales leader, and I learned how to do it watching how they did it. And I learned a lot of the things that I just imparted on everybody here earlier in the podcast. And then, through the course of having success there, I now became what was viewed in the VC world as a horse that's won, which makes it a lot easier once you've delivered a return to investors. And now the whole world opens up to you. And so I was very fortunate in that first venture to be able to not have to be the one that raised the money, but the one that made the money and then helped deliver the return. And that just made everything easier.
Thank you. And what are the top mistakes entrepreneurs make when they raise their first million?
Well, they don't focus their resources on developing their market. They focus it on developing their product, most often because that's what they know and like and enjoy. They need to spend the overwhelming majority of their time falling in love with the problem and the customer and how to solve for that, and then build based on that, as opposed to building something to their own vision and then trying to shove it down someone's throat, and then recognizing that it's not going to happen. In Silicon Valley, the statistics are 70 to 80% of funded startups fail. 8 of the top 10 reasons why they fail have to do with the people and the markets, not their product or technology. It's never been easier to build products and launch technology. It's never been easier or cheaper. As a result, it's never been more difficult to get traction for those things, right? So that's where the focus needs to be. And so what I see then is they have limited time, money, and resources to find their truth about where their product fits in a market, if it does at all, and what to do about it. And spending all that time on developing the product is the wrong move. They need to be spending that time developing their market, and then the product will follow.
Thank you. And what is your message to the world?
Just what, generally speaking? I mean,
yes.
Yeah. I mean, I just, I think, success in this life comes from helping others get what they want. And I think that's kind of what I try to live by. If I help others, it's going to come back in spades. And so if you do that with sincerity, authenticity, and intentionality, I think good things can happen for you.
Thank you. And which experience awakened your drive to make a difference and be successful?
I don't know if there's one experience. I felt like I was just sort of born this way. I mean, I was called to entrepreneurship. I didn't go to it. It just sort of dragged me in that direction. Always had a lot of energy, always a lot of curiosity, always liked, to help people and make money. I've always been, kind of a free market, libertarian capitalist kind of a mindset, that everything was out there for me and I just had to go get it. And that's what I've always done. I just don't know any other way.
Thank you. And how did this realization influence your business strategy?
Well, let's just say I'm much more strategic here today, 30 years later, than I was, when I was in my early 20s. So I used to just be sort of a brute force approach person. And I still have that in me, but I'm much more thoughtful and strategic about where I allocate my time and money and resources today than I was then.
Thank you. So what I'm getting is that as an entrepreneur, you need to focus on the right things, which is the marketing, because so many entrepreneurs focus on their product and not enough money on marketing. And you have to also work with an accelerator like yours that could potentially help them to grow their business as well, to go from zero
That's
to
one. That's certainly one option. And when you say money on marketing, I want to just be clear. It's resources, right? Because what is money translated into when you raise money for a startup? It's into hiring people, right, to do things, right? And what I see people do is take 80% of their money and put it into developing their product instead of developing their market, and then you need to do it the other way around if they want to have a better chance at success.
Thank you. And last question, what resources did you leverage to become successful?
It's people, and it's content, right? It's sort of that you find what you focus on in life. And if you put out to the world that you need help in certain areas and that you recognize you don't know what you don't know, you'll be amazed, right? It's the old Confucian axiom of when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So just be a student and be a learn-it-all and tell the world you don't know what you don't know about certain things, and recognize that you may be a great coder and you may not be, and you might be socially awkward and you might not enjoy talking to humans outside of the world that you know. So go find a Sean, go find somebody like me. I'm not a tech guy. I can't even spell HTML. I'm the business and human translator between the engineers and the customers. And that's always been my skill set, and that's what I enjoy doing. So if you're a solo founder who's a tech guy or girl, go find a non-tech co-founder, and vice versa. You know, if you're like me, I always need great technical people to support me in that effort.
Thank you so much. I loved what you said. And I also loved what you said earlier about the power of storytelling and branding and choosing the right name and working with the right co-founder that can help you to spread the word about your business. Because as an introvert myself, it was initially so hard to speak up and to speak to the people I actually really wanted to speak. I was so scared, even raising my hand in an event with hundreds of people. It was too scary to even do that. So when you are in that stage, you just need someone like Sean to help you to grow your business, so he can be the spokesperson of your business. Thank you so much for this.
Yeah, there's a it's like a restaurant. You've got the front of the house and the back of the house, right? And people are good at what they're good at, and they need to work together to make it happen.
Thank you. Follow us for more interviews with world's most influential business titans, providing you with the insights to awaken to your full potential, so you can get paid to be yourself, find true happiness, and manifest anything you desire.